Southern storytelling to me is the cornerstone of Southern culture. I think every Southern person is a great storyteller. It's handed down from our parents, our grandparents. It just makes me feel so much closer to home.
To me, it's culture sharing, and it's highlighting America and that kind of multi-fabric that seems to weave together, but also every now and then break. And so maybe it's even a glue.
I look at storytelling just in general as a way that history is kind of preserved. It could be done in many ways. Music, movies, photography. It's a way to kind of pass along information, ideas, preserve the times.
I got my start doing digital content when I got laid off from my funeral home job. People ask me often, like, how did you start work in the funeral home? There was a career day when I was in middle school, and the local funeral home brought the hearse, and I was the first goth kid in line and asked the guy if I could lay in the casket. I made this video called Conway Twitty's Cause of Death for the pathology for mortuary science class. I think just because I was listening to a lot of Conway at the time, and it was meant for the 12 people who were in that class. The funeral home that I worked for, pretty much everybody got laid off. It was somewhere during that transition where I went back to YouTube and I was like, oh, this video has 300,000 views. Maybe I'm onto something here, let's try some more.
Even before I created online, I think I always attempted to connect in some way. I always liked sharing what I was learning. I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I think a lot of what I do is obviously share Louisiana culture, but also I like to put a spotlight on the African presence in the Americas. I've always been a doubting Thomas, somebody who needed proof. I'd heard a lot of oral history, and I needed to find out if that were true. So I was able to kind of verify what my family was saying for the most part. And I wanted just to kind of strengthen that oral history with visual proof.
I always look at photos as a way of like time traveling. You can take a slice of time and it's there. That's like fascinating to me. I feel it's like an artist's duty, just as Nina Simone said, for us as creators and artists to document the times. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I consider myself a multi-hyphenate creative. You can create the things that you want to see, create your own space to put your work out. I think my first time being cognitive of Black people not being represented in a creative space, I used to go to these art crawls in Nashville, and you walk around and I didn't really see a lot of us represented in the work or as the artist presenting the work. And then I remember when I first started doing photography, and I was a big fan of magazines like Complex, XXL, and I remember like, all right, I'm gonna submit some work. And of course, I never heard anything back. And that's what kind of fueled me stepping into the light of creating my own spaces.
Appalachia is the perfect setting for storytelling because most of our stories come from sheer survival. So many local characters that had these just far out lives that a Hollywood writer could never come up with. My uncle, he goes and pans for gold in the rivers and creeks and streams of Appalachia, and I find that he's steeped in Civil War history and these handed down stories. As a child, these tales that would like incite me to want to go explore and go adventure into the woods and find things that have been lost. Treasures or loot or gold. Most of my content is built around growing up with my grandparents. My Mima, my nanny, my grannies. I was bounced around between all of them. I've discovered that there are more people that grew up like me than I realized, and we could all meet on a common ground. It's a full moon tonight, and that can only mean one thing. The Haints will be walking in the holler. There's certainly a lot of misconceptions about Appalachia. Because of the way we talk, we're uneducated, or what has been portrayed in the media, even like the original Mountain Dew commercial. Yahoo! Mountain Dew! There's been a lot of jokes made at the expense of Southern Appalachian people. One of my goals is to discredit a lot of those stereotypes, and we can laugh at ourselves. But when it comes to other people pointing the finger, it's not allowed on my watch. There's a lot of people moving to Appalachia from rude places in the United States, so just be sure to set that attitude out on the street before you come here.
Louisiana is more than red beans and rice and jazz. It's deeper than that. Culinary enjoyments, music, the culture. The culture is defined by the struggle and survival. I try to approach things, especially delicate subjects, with reverence, but also it can't just be a dark, somber day, right? If you just dwell on them, it's gonna deluminate. This helps. Sorry for the microphone. By the time you're like, why is this guy wearing a top hat? You've hopefully invested a little bit of time to where you're interested in seeing what I'm talking about.
Let me show you something you're not going to see in a museum.
I found a painting of my ancestor, and it was languishing in a basement in California. A free man of color born in 1760 New Orleans. And it was in a basement in California with cousins who had only just recently discovered their past. The free people of color were a force to be reckoned with. People just believe or think of just slaves arriving, unskilled workers, but that's actually not the case. We had people who, of course, knew mathematics. I mean, look at the architecture. Also, a lot of these large plantations you see were built by free men of color. The refinement of sugar production is made by a man named Norbert Rieu. They accounted for 1/5 of the population, and they own 1/3 of the buildings in French Quarter. I mean, so they affected every aspect of this culture. Because of historians in the past and because of archivists of the past, a lot of the truth, I think, was never preserved. So that's not put into something where it would be safeguarded and protected and then shared. I have been posting this image of this little boy for years. The New Orleans Museum of Art. They had decided to deaccession the work, which is common in museums. They look around and they say, look, these pieces are no longer relevant. I was able to find a crucial clue of where the painting was from Instagram. And a person I met once at an antique fair said, oh, I remember where that painting was. I said, you remember where it was? What? So he gave me the name of the dealer. Well, I kept calling. Eventually he put me in contact with the owner in Washington, D.C. She always said that she was holding that painting for something. It was that on that suit. So she agreed to allow me to purchase the painting. So I placed it with the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Now I think 4 million people have access to it a year or so. I think it's a remarkable new world we have where we can now safeguard this by sharing it. And so where this won't happen again. I think the past kind of defines our future, and I think a lot of that causes us to heal is that the bad things, the not so great things, the scratches, the scars, and we all have that. I think we're all after the same thing, largely, and people call it different things, but I think it's healing. I think it's unity. I think it's community.
All right, history is a full-time job.
All right, guys, welcome to the very first installment of Conversations with Creatives. I'm here with Ms. Jayla Slater. My inspiration for creating these spaces is more so from a regional standpoint. I think we have a lot of talented people here, and everyone doesn't get their shine on a major platform. So I figured we can still share these stories.
I want people to realize that you can create from a space of authenticity. You can create in the pocket that you want to create in. So these are my babies. my magazine issues. The latest piece features the work of various photographers around Memphis, just documenting like the culture, the music scene.
The work that I've put out online has somewhat shaped people's narrative of Memphis. When people think of Memphis, especially when you talk to people outside of Memphis, Elvis, Beale Street, they think about the legacy aspects of Memphis. My content has kind of shared a side of Memphis that people didn't know existed here, and just the South in general.
All right, y'all. Today, we're here at Stax Museum telling stories about Memphis.
When you think about traditional media, only so many people can get in, but I think the digital space has opened it up. You're able to create from your perspective, from your voice.
It's important to me to keep the stories of Appalachia alive because a lot of the older generation where the stories come from are passing away.
When I look at collectors of the past, a lot of what was acquired was for novelty and also for showmanship. And I don't think you can come into this world with that attitude. The history is bigger than me. It's a responsibility. The South remains a force to be reckoned with, good and bad.
I don't think the digital age has necessarily changed the South per se. I think it's made it more accessible. It's just not one-sided. You get to hear voices that you probably wouldn't have heard.
It's been a goal to just preserve as many of these stories in the digital realm as I possibly can.